Okay. Good morning, everybody. Well, maybe it is morning for you. I don't know. It's morning for me. It's not morning for Leo Farberg, who is
No.
over there in wherever he is right now. What time of day is it anyway, Leo?
It's about 4 p.m. So good afternoon, everybody.
Yeah, good afternoon, good morning, whatever, good day. Right, so what are we going to be talking about today? What are we going to be turning the tables on? Well, Leo and I had a conversation a few days ago, and we were talking generally about some of the things that our clients bring to us. So you've got one thing, let's say this is the one thing in this hand here, and that one thing is whatever it was that brought them to a therapy situation in the first place. It can be a whole host of things, so let's not dwell too much on that. But what they also bring in the other hand is somebody close to them, a close relationship to them, where support is also needed. They've identified something. It may not be directly linked to them. It might be linked only because they have the relationship. It's something from the other person's past. So there's all kinds of challenges going on, but there's a clear need that the other person needs to seek out some sort of therapeutic support. Problem being, they don't want to seek that support. They think they've managed so far particularly well, thank you very much. So why should I go looking for support now? But yet the other person is feeling that things aren't quite right. So that's difficult for them. So they get something added to their existing challenge, whatever that may be, which obviously is going to muddy the waters a little bit more, and it makes cleansing a little bit more difficult. You wonder what I'm talking about, cleansing the waters. We've just had a great conversation. Maybe Leo will share some of it in a few minutes. If not, I will. So Leo, we meet this client who has another person closely linked to them that also needs support. What can we do? What can they do? What's the best way forward?
Well, of course, if we look at things that idealistically, the family system support family system therapy might be a very good way to address the problem of both or more family members or people involved into relationships, because when we very often, if it appears that one family member has some trouble, some problems, or at least recognizes them and goes to therapy, it appears that probably he's not the most troubled ones, but the most aware and awakened one, because at least either this person shows symptoms, what we call, right, like special behavior or some other troubles, maybe addiction, maybe some mental health issues. And so they are ones who either obviously need help, or at least acknowledge that and address to somebody to get help, to a specialist. But it's just, I think it's necessary to look at it as a normal thing, that when you start working with such a client, you definitely see some family patterns, whether they come from the client's childhood and then somehow are acted in the relationships that they are in now, or some family relationships or patterns that come from the other member of the family, and then they start playing out, and they are obviously unconscious. And a therapist is an important tool, if I may say so, not only the tools that a therapist uses, but the therapist is a tool of seeing and excavating and analyzing this family patterns, this kind of momentum that people bring from each other's, well, from their own families, and start playing out in their current relationship, which may be very destructive. It's just obvious. It's not. It doesn't concern like little children or minors, because it's. For example, I okay, I can keep telling this every time, and then again I become weak, and I take a teenager into therapy, and then again I face one and the same problem. As soon as you start getting some change in a family member, other family members will definitely feel that, and very often it's not something that eases the relationships. It complicates the relationships because other family members don't change their agenda. They they proceed being themselves and acting as they uh, have been acting all their life, and it's especially painful with the uh, children's therapy, because you can do nothing. You start helping the kid, and the kid gets back to the family.
Yeah, I think a really wonderful example comes to mind, and I'm going to simplify this for the sake of this conversation. Otherwise, we could be here for a very long time.
Yeah.
So, working with a particular client, one of the challenges for this person was that they didn't feel much love coming from the partner. They kind of knew that love was there, but they didn't experience feelings very often. The touching, holding hands, for example, a simple thing, holding hands, didn't happen. So she was concerned, what's going on here? So we did some exploration about the relationship. Some relationships drift apart. But we were very happy with the idea that this relationship wasn't drifting apart, but yet still there was a problem with the partner. It was close to Christmas time, and I happened to mention a Christmas card that I'd received from somebody, which was very funny. This was during a break in the session. And she had an aha moment, and it was quite apparent, the look on her face. So what was this aha moment? She said, whenever I get a card from my partner, be it a birthday card or whatever card, all it says on it is, for example, happy birthday and the name of the person. Nothing else. No love from, no hope you have a wonderful day, no kisses. In English, we do little crosses for kisses. You know, there's none of that. It was just happy birthday, person's name. So I wondered if there was something about showing emotion going on in this other partner. So we began to explore that, and we explored to the point of my client talked to the partner's mother, who was quite elderly at the time. And it had been true that there'd been very little show of emotion in that family's relationships. So we knew that there was something going on with emotion. At the same time, he noticed that my client was improving, was getting better, was managing the challenges that she came to me with, and her outlook was much brighter. He noticed that, and it started to make him feel uncomfortable. He started to question what was going on. So she raised the thing about the conversation with mum and the cards, birthday cards and so on. And he said, that is the way it is. He didn't want to take it any further than that, except to say, that's the way it is. That's what I know. That's what I've been brought up with. But that helped provide or generate this dysfunctional relationship where one partner was sharing the love and the other partner probably did love, but didn't know how to share it. It's an ongoing situation. We're working on bringing the two closer together so that they can actually talk about it, but at the moment it's not happening. How many relationships are out there where there's similar scenarios to this? How many people feel as though they're drowning because they don't know how to manage these situations? And I mentioned at the very beginning today as well. So my clients already had some challenges, and they're not about the partner exactly. And then you get the partner challenges added to that, and suddenly she's got what I like to call a can of worms. And they're all mixed up and wrapped together, and they're really difficult to untangle. So the situation becomes a whole lot more difficult. So what can we do? How can we encourage people to say, actually, I do need support. Actually, I should at least explore this. So how do we do that? That's the big question. So I'm going to be mean now and ask you what we should do, Leo.
Well, my clients are mostly women, and mostly they are burned out, depressed, anxious, maybe not to an extreme point, but anyway, all such emotions usually bring women to a therapist, because in most of the European cultures, at least, well, I also guess it's some mostly, well, probably cultural thing, or maybe it's also not exactly gender thing, but women are more sensitive to emotions, whatever the reason is, or maybe a bit more open to emotions. And they're also brought up in a way that they should share their emotions, or should support everybody around, be good to everybody, be convenient, and not show their bad emotions, and so on and so forth. So they have all this bunch of suppressed emotions, and so they are more likely to show up to a therapist's office than men. And of course, one of the main issues for them, even it's not the main question which they bring to therapy, it's relationships. Because if they are brought up to be careful, caring and supportive to their partners, they basically expect the same from their partners. But very often they don't get it, because men mostly are brought up on with this bias that they shouldn't share their emotions, or that emotions are destructive or vulnerable, or a girl thing, or whatever. And I have a trick. What I call my guru, when I started my education as a therapist, he was quite a well-known guru in a big city, in a big university, a professor and a practical psychotherapist. So I call him a guru, but in kind of a little bit of. And he said, he taught me that, and he's a psychiatrist. I'm a clinical psychologist, and he's a psychiatrist, so he sees more of severe cases. So he says, I call the husband myself, and I give myself a worried tone, and very like, he said, I'm very worried about your wife. It's a big problem. We have to. I have to share it, and I have to find someone to support me, and to have some decisions on her, what we could do, and we can. And men get worried, the husbands, and they agree. So it's not addressing their problems. It's your wife got a problem, and they cannot do anything without getting your advice.
Yeah.
And then the husband shows up in the office, and he starts working mostly in this family system therapy manner, and tries to involve the husband in a conversation, and explaining some things and dropping some ideas into his head. He's very he does it well, and I got this idea and I try to use it sometimes. At least tell the wives, tell the husbands that psychologist wants you to come because he worries. It's not that your fault or that's your fault or you're not being supportive or something. That, well, the psychologist thinks that the situation is much more difficult than he thought, so he wants you to discuss the issues and what to do with that. So it's an obvious lie. It's a trick, but sometimes it works.
That's an interesting approach, and I must admit that the word ethics comes into my head. Is it ethical?
Yeah,
It probably is.
well, there's no, it's not, it's kind of a nice manipulation because
Yeah,
sometimes you really need to help the client and get some family involved. It's important, and sometimes it's really very important and even crucial to get some family support. And another thing is that I mostly prefer to do. It's not the usual trick that I do. I just share that I have one in my toolkit. But it's okay if your partner doesn't want or thinks he's all right and he is fine. Okay, but anyway, it is important for you to get stabilized and to get uh, regulated and to become happy finally. So if your partner doesn't want to come, so very often the partners even don't know that the spouse goes to a therapist. It's also very uh, a regular thing. So if I say that again, another law of family systems or any systems is that when you address to one part of the system, you get the whole system affected.
yeah.
So to some reasonable extent, working with just one family member is fine. But the thing is that the further one family member goes along their healing path or getting integrated, getting regulated, getting to know what they want, what their real goals are, there comes the chance of breaking the family.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I usually say about it.
Yeah, that is quite a common thing. It's, I had a conversation recently with a client about her North Star, the place she really wants to be, the direction she's heading, all of those things. It's a very positive place and route to go. You see the animation in her when she talks about it. It's wonderful to see.
Mm-hmm.
But her partner is quite happy, not really jumping around, not really pushing for a North Star of any description. But he's not abusive. He doesn't have any challenges in particular, but he's not going down that road with her. And we did have to raise that. If he doesn't want to come with you, how are you going to manage it? What are you going to do? Are you going to do it alone and leave him behind? Or are you just going to put up with the fact that he doesn't want to follow you and just keep the relationship going, but don't worry about where you're ending up, where he's ending up? But the problem with that is there's going to be such a split in difference at some stage that they're going to have to confront it. So that's the next, we've moved on now. That was the next stage of the conversation. How do we confront this? She didn't want to hurt him, but she needed him to understand that her road was a different road to his. There was no lack of love. So you've got a lot of positive things going on. You've got this big thing, following the North Star.
Another thing I want to mention is if a partner is loyal and is and basically love is there and attraction and people really manage to be different in one family. If again, if the partner is not opposed to whatever things are interesting to the other partner or whatever the North Star is, if they don't prevent or being loyal, that's fine. The thing is that we are in this age we believe into a nuclear family ideal that there's a husband and wife and the older generation lives someplace, the kids grow up and leave the house and still there's husband and wife, but that's not true. Historically people used to work in and live in communities. They didn't live in the apartments or separate houses. They weren't supposed to be connected just one on one. They the hunter gatherers community are a community.
Yeah.
If you need more fun, or you can get to your other members of this clan or group. And remember we talked about the pop culture, which is now kind of declining
Yeah.
because it's losing the community uh, part of it. That it's a kind of not just a place where you come and drink a beer or two. As far as I get it, it used to be a place to communicate, to
Yeah.
talk, to share, to sing, to dance, to chat, to have a fight, and
Yeah.
and vent out your aggression. Not to do it at home and probably or church community where you go and spend your time with the people of your faith and not because it's something obligatory or but because you feel uh, good there, you feel supported,
Yeah.
and now it's kind of
Yeah, I
declining.
think the community, well, yeah, we had that conversation about pub culture, which is something close to me because I come from a small town which used to have, I almost said has, used to have a large number of pubs. But given the size of the population, it was like, oh, are all these people in this town alcoholics? Do they need so much alcohol? But that wasn't the way it was. It was what you just talked about. It was about community. It was about sharing. It was about talking to one another. I remember, for example, I went to meet some friends in a pub one time. I was about 20 years old, and I was sat on my own. The pub hadn't been open very long, so there wasn't many people around. So I sat down on my own, waiting for my friends to arrive, and opposite me there's a guy. And he looked at me and he smiled, and eventually he said, "Would you mind if I came over?" And I said, "No, of course." I didn't know this guy. And so he sat down and he immediately pulled out a picture from his jacket pocket, and it was a pencil drawing of somebody who kind of looked a bit like me. I knew it wasn't me, but it was kind of, there was similarities, and it was like a bit spooky. And he said, "Don't worry, this is my brother." And it struck me how much you are alike in looks. And I said, "Wow." So I asked him about his brother, and his brother lived many thousands of miles away in India. And he wasn't doing too well. He was sick, and there was a big backstory to this. But the guy just made that conversation with me and that connection. It lasted maybe 20 minutes, half an hour. And it mattered to him. I know that he felt better at the end of it, not because of anything fantastic that I said, but just the fact that he wasn't able to connect. He was able to connect. The fact that I looked a bit like his brother at that time, which I found, as I said, I was 20 years older, so I thought it was a bit spooky, but it was kind of cool at the same time. So there was all kinds of things happening in these pubs, and yet the pubs today are beginning to disappear. There are still pubs, but nowhere near as many. I heard a story a few days ago that one of the pubs in this small town is going to become a restaurant soon. So it's going to lose its pub. It's community spirit. It becomes something else. So it's affecting people in all kinds of ways. And like you said, if one member of the family has a challenge and is having a hard time, it filters out to the rest of the community, the family. We might not be acutely aware of that, but it is happening. If something wonderful is happening, the woman with the North Star, that filters to the rest of the family. And then what happens? Do we get some jealousy? Do we get some mistrust? Do we get some worry? We get all kinds of emotions coming out. So we need to be able to manage those. We need to be able to talk about them. And we need to find ways to do so. For some, it's easier than others. Some people respond. If you ask me a question about how I'm feeling, I have no problem telling you. But if you ask my dad the same question, he's not going to tell you. And it's nothing personal. It's all about values, where we come from, our family background, our history, all kinds of things are involved. But we need to find a way to talk. There was a TV advert in the UK. I'm going to shut up when I've repeated this. Something to do with the telephone system some years ago. And the tagline at the end of the television advert was, "It's good to talk." And it is good to talk.
Yes, it is. And with my clients, I very often see that I am kind of a paid specialist, and I'm the only friend of this person, and it's very sad. And but what we keep working on is at least working through some issues and then turning towards other people. Like I usually say that therapists are someone to train with, to train talking, to train acting, to train even quarreling sometimes. But then you go off to the bigger world and find someone to become your friend or partner or whatever. And that's why probably therapy is now I hope therapy in whatever way it is, whether it's a personal therapy, individual, or is it group therapy, it's the way to talk, it's the way to show up, it's the way to open up and start find the more working communication patterns. And group therapy, for example, is another way where you are talking not just with a therapist but with others in the group, and you get more feedback and you give feedback and you get support and you give support, which is very important because the research says that giving support and being helpful and being generous and being benevolent is even much more important for people than getting supported or getting something for themselves. Sharing feels much better than getting. And that's why therapy should be kind of a new way, a new link to society, I should say, in general terms.
Absolutely. I agree completely. I was just thinking back to, many people know the story, but some of our listeners or viewers today may not. I had an accident many years ago, and the accident left me disabled. I ended up in a wheelchair, yada, yada, yada. Mental health was not positive. Physical health was a mess. So eventually, after lots of different intervention, various types, some of it with individual psychologists, which was weird in itself. As a psychologist talking to a psychologist, I didn't want to cooperate because I thought I knew better. That's a long story. But eventually I was offered a group. Come to this group. All the people in this group have various reasons for suffering from pain. So I didn't want to go. I thought it was scary. I didn't admit any of this, but I thought it was scary. I didn't want people to hear my story. I didn't want to show my vulnerabilities, a ton of stuff. Just flooded out when I was thinking about going to this group. But I went to this group and started to listen. I realized that other people had pain too, which was a very early thought and step. So other people have got pain too. Well, that's cool. Okay, I'm beginning to understand this now. But as you just said a minute ago, Leo, the biggest positive for me that came out of it was sharing with other people how I felt. It wasn't showing off. It wasn't me trying to make them feel better. But by sharing the way I felt, people grabbed onto little bits of it, little bits that resonated with them. And that helped them feel better. When they shared how they felt, I grabbed bits of what they said, and that helped me feel better. So between this group of 10 to, there was 12 people, I think. So between this small group of people, we shared all these little tips, these little thoughts, these feelings, these vulnerabilities and emotions and positive things as well. It wasn't all negatives. So we shared all of that and grabbed bits of it. And together we healed. We moved forward. Okay, there was no magic. It wasn't a biblical healing. It wasn't that sort of thing. But we did move forward. So I think that's important for people to realize about groups. Groups are very powerful places.
Yeah.
I had my eyes opened by being part of one in a difficult position because my relationships at that time were not great. Well, all kinds of things were not great because of the way suffering and struggling. You know, so sometimes we've got to say, yeah, I'll try that. Yeah, why not? Let's go talk about it with this therapist. Let's join that therapist group. Incidentally, Leo and I do have groups. You can join us. We can form a group which is special if necessary. You know, if we get, I've worked with people with chronic pain. So if we get a group of chronic pain sufferers, we can put those people together in a group because they've got a common challenge, as it were. It might not be identical, but they're common challenges. So we can do all kinds of things.
Yeah, and I also wanted to mention that many people now hear a lot about therapy and psychology and coaching and whatever, and groups and all types of stuff, but usually they are afraid to go, and they don't see any need to go because on this visible side, it's like, why should I tell my story? Why should I listen to everybody else's stories? But the thing is, like you, Steve, just mentioned, that it's not just sharing the story, but it's sharing the emotion behind the story, the feeling. And the stories are just information, and really we don't need more information on our lives nowadays. But what is still important and what's becoming more important is that emotional resonance, is that we get emotionally connected, spiritually connected, and we start resonating with each other in a healing way, not in a destructive way. Because just listening to bad stories, like bad news, every day, it's destructive for our health. But getting together and healing, helping each other heal, that makes these groups so powerful, because you do basically, it's biology of emotion, it's biology of human connection, and it's survival. For humans, connection is survival. It's not strength or a stiff upper lip that helps people survive, as we have thought or we were taught, but it's vice versa. Emotional connection and support and love, and that's the healing resonance. And that's why groups sometimes are much more powerful than a personal work, or like both together, or sometime personal work and then group therapy. And very often people who go through therapy themselves become helpers, because it's not something that you explain, as we do in this podcast. I like to explain things. Steve likes to illustrate things, but the real therapy is not information. Therapy is that resonance, and when you feel it, you become you want to do more. You want to help other people. Many people after therapy want to become counselors or therapists themselves, because this world needs that. This world needs healing.
Absolutely. Here's an interest. I'm going to do one more illustration, and
Uh,
it comes off the back of the group I was talking about a few minutes ago. I can't quantify this, but if I look, for example, at my Facebook friends, okay, some of them are family, so we have the family relationship going on there. Some of them are friends I've known forever, so we've kind of got some relationship there, but it's not always a close relationship, but at least it's a link. There are relationships like yours and I, Leo, so we're friends and we're colleagues, and that's a really positive relationship. But I've got these other relationships from this particular group that I was just talking about. And if I'm really honest, I was just briefly thinking about it, they're amongst the most powerful relationships I have in my life. I know I can talk to these people about anything, and we do frequently. They talk to me about things. I'll get a message out of the blue from somebody in that group, and it will be something quite personal. And I don't get that from many other people. Okay, close friends, that's different. But we have a different form of relationship. It's a very strong relationship. Interesting what you said as well about people who've been through those situations becoming counselors and so on. Two people out of that group, excluding me, are one is a counselor, one is a nurse practitioner in a pain management clinic, which is like, wow, that's exactly what you were talking about. The others already had professions, apart from one or two. One or two didn't really, but many of the others had professions, and they're still in those professions. I don't know all of them still. We don't all have contact, but those that we do have contact with are very strong contacts, very close. So that's something special that came out of that group. And I don't think the group leaders would ever have envisaged that. So I'm talking now about 2005, this particular group. No, sorry, 2007, 2008. And today I still have the relationships. And that kind of tells you something. So it's worth thinking about.
yeah.
Is that a good thought to finish on? Or do you have more to
Yeah, I
say,
think.
Leo?
Oh, we've got tons of that, but probably we'll save it for the next podcast, but for the next talk.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks for listening, everybody. Remember, or watching, depending on what you do. Remember, leave us questions, plenty of questions. You can leave them on Spotify, Anchor FM, Apple Podcasts, all over the place. Or you can leave messages on Facebook Messenger, wherever you can find us, you can leave messages or here on YouTube as well, which is where this happens to be going live right now. Facebook wouldn't work today. Why not? No idea. So leave us messages, leave us questions, and we'll be back about a week away. Normally we try to aim to go out on a Monday, but sometimes things happen and we have to change things around a bit. But leave us messages and we'll be in touch. Okay, take care. Good to see you.